Hello everyone, I'm Bruffy1322 and this video, alongside the previous 4 in the series, is going to showcase the fastest fully upgraded vehicles in GTA Online overall in terms of lap time, with this video focusing on the top 100. As always, the position counter is in the top left with the best lap time the vehicle achieved in the top right, and in a mirror of how this series started, we won't be including planes, boats, helicopters or bikes in this list. So, over the last 4 videos before this one, we've seen all cars in the game from 522nd place all the way to now. It's still kind of crazy that I've tested that many vehicles in addition to all the planes, boats, bikes and helicopters. But if you haven't seen any of the previous videos, I highly recommend watching them from the playlist link in the description. It's also in the pinned comment. We talk about a lot of things, including the history of this series and the future of testing on the channel. It's well worth going back and just sitting back and listening, to be honest, and watching the full list from 522nd all the way to now. But this is where the big boys come in. In this video we've got 11 cars that are at the top of their respective classes. We've already seen one of them with the Toros and we're about to see another one with the Turismo Classic. And we've got some of the most common cars for people to own, and even some old 2013, 2014 cars are in here which can still pack a punch, although most of these are DLC cars that have been added since, which just kind of makes sense because we've just had so many cars be added via DLC. The makeup of this top 100 in terms of the number of vehicles that are in each class are 2 off-road vehicles, 1 SUV, which we saw with the Toros, 2 Sports Classics cars, 1 muscle car, that's just a singular one, 43 sports cars, 47 supercars and 4 open wheelers. That is the entire makeup of the top 100. There's no coupes, no sedans. None of the other classes feature in the top 100 of all cars overall. I figured in this video, since it is the last in the collection where we've gone over all the cars in the game, I'd sort of present and talk over some stats related to this list because some of them are really interesting, and one thing that I particularly found interesting was the lap time improvements across each video. So even just from 522nd to 501st place, which was the first 22 cars in the very first video, we gained a lap time of 6 minutes and 53 seconds, and that's mainly because obviously the dozer is so slow at the very bottom of the class with a nearly 9-minute lap time that there was such an improvement gain even just in the first 22 cars. But then from 500th place to 401st for the rest of that first video, we gained an extra 30 seconds of lap time, so that was still quite a significant chunk in those early 100 vehicles. So 100 vehicles separated by 30 seconds seems fairly reasonable, but then it really starts to close up, as we've seen in the last few videos. From 400th to 301st place in the second video, we only gained 6.7 seconds worth of lap time from 400th place all the way to 301st. From 300th place all the way to 201st, we only gained 5 seconds of lap time, and the previous video was actually the most dense of all of them, where from 200th place to 101st place, we only gained 4.5 seconds of lap time, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, and especially when you consider from 101st place all the way down to 300th, so 200 vehicles are separated by less than 10 seconds worth of lap time. It's crazy how that works out, and it's interesting that this you would kind of expect that trend to continue and this top 100 to be, you know, even more densely packed, but that's actually not the case. From 100th place to first, we've actually got 10 seconds separating the top 100, and that's because as we get closer to the end of the list, we get quicker and quicker vehicles again that sort of pull out a little bit more of a gap. It's kind of interesting how that's worked out, that it's sort of that 200, the middle 100 really, that are the closest packed in comparison. You know, this top 100, we haven't seen a gap from 100th to first as big as, you know, it's been 3 videos since we've seen a gap that big. We have to go back to 500th to 401st to see a gap that big. So yeah, it's just interesting how the lap time has sort of improved over the course of the videos, and certainly when we're talking about from the very last position, with the Dozer getting a 9-minute lap time in comparison to the lap time that we'll see from the top vehicles, it's quite substantial. And I guess you can't blame GTA for including a lot of variety with not only the type of vehicles but also the level of performance of them as well. Which lap time is the most common? In terms of if you get rid of all the extra parts of the lap time, so that everything after the second range, what is the most common? I'll give you a few seconds to have a guess of what you think it might be. Is it 1 minute 5, 1 minute 6, 1 minute 7, for example? Which has the largest number of cars with a lap time like that? Well, there's a lot of lap times that have 19 cars at present, so we'll discount any that are sort of around that area. There are 20 cars in the 1 minute 16 level of lap time and 21 cars in the 1 minute 13 level of lap time. Those two really surprised me. I thought it would definitely be sort of sub 1 minute 10, but the fact that 1 minute 16, it seems so far out there, and it's sort of one of the most common lap times. There's 22 cars that cover 1 minute 5 and 1 minute 17, so there's an equal number of cars with a 1 minute 5 point something lap time as there are a 1 minute 17 point something lap time. That's crazy, but the same story is true of 1 minute 8 and 1 minute 12, where there's 24 cars with a 1 minute 8 lap time and 24 cars with a 1 minute 12 lap time. There's one extra car, 25, with a 1 minute 6 lap time, but the ultimate most common lap time is actually, it's in this video, it's 1 minute 4. 28 cars have a 1 minute 4 point something lap time. That is astonishing to me when you consider that there's 28 cars separated by a single second of lap time. That's amazing. And when it comes to sort of, I've talked throughout this sort of little mini series about the ability to just race whatever we wanted without any class restrictions, just setting a race to open and being able to choose everything. Can you imagine a race where we'd be able to choose 28 different vehicles and they would pretty much all be on the same pace? Being separated by 1 second of lap time over a 1 minute track is, it's at least close enough that they would all sort of be in a similar tier of performance. That's just amazing to me that we could theoretically have a race with 28 different unique vehicles and they would all be within a second of each other. They would all be relatively well balanced in a racing situation, at least close enough that any regular person is going to be able to race with them competitively. We've also talked about it a decent amount in the last few videos that there are multiple instances where 2 cars share exactly the same lap time, and there's actually 5 instances of that in this video as well. So the 5 instances in this video bring the total across the entire list to 19 different instances where 2 cars have shared the exact same lap time. That's another crazy fact to me. But again, as we saw from one of the previous videos, there's one instance where 3 cars share the exact same lap time as well. Back in the 3rd video we saw that. So just amazing little things that, when you're testing so many different vehicles and you have such a huge sample size of testing results, you're going to get these amazing little facts that come into it and coincidences. Now, obviously doing all of this all over again would probably yield different results. A fraction of a tenth of a second can change whether one car gets exactly the same lap time as another, and would change just based on natural variance of testing for lap times. But still, it's just an amazing thing that in this testing, as part of this big series of testing everything, there's been 19 instances where 2 cars have shared exactly the same lap time and 1 instance where 3 cars have shared exactly the same lap time. Just crazy. One last thing that I wanted to mention before we get to basically what will be the top 50, and we'll talk a little bit more about the cars themselves as we come on to the top 50, is that obviously this is towards the end of this series. We're going to start doing something new for the next gen versions of the game, because the testing is going to be required to be slightly different with it moving to 60 FPS and all that kind of stuff. I talked about that at length in the 3rd video. But if you want to commemorate the ending of this series, there's a new t-shirt design up on my merch store. Keep calm and continue testing is, I think, the perfect phrase to encapsulate what's happened on this channel over the last 8 years. And alongside the now iconic Cutting Corners GP track map, which is the track that I use for all of my testing, it's a simple design that I think just really, really works. You can obviously get this new design on t-shirts, but you can also get it on hoodies, mugs, stickers, all sorts of other items. You just got to scroll down on the page for the design to check out those other items as well. It's all on my merch store, along with all sorts of other designs as well that you can check out. Bruffy.com/merch. By all means, feel free to check it out and maybe grab something. I'll leave a link to it in the description as well. And my merch store does do periodic discounts, which if you're watching this when it goes live, there will be one active, so you can get t-shirts for sort of $13 and things like that. And they do it periodically as well. But yeah, link in the description for that. It's just, I think this new design, it was an idea I had. I was thinking, what idea could we have for a t-shirt that is related to, you know, my testing, because I've never really had a t-shirt design related to testing. We've had G-Fred t-shirts and Random All t-shirts and things like that, but nothing related to the car testing. And this idea just came to me. Keep calm and continue testing with the track map. And thanks to Catalyst for the help on getting the design sorted and nailed down as well, because I think it turned out really nice in the end. So yeah, feel free to check that one out. And it's a good phrase to think about going forward as well. I've talked a lot about the future of testing on this channel, but keeping calm and just keeping testing, I think that's a good way to approach it, regardless of what format it is and how I choose to approach it in the future. So we're coming on to the top 50 in the list. This is the top 50 quickest cars in the game. You've seen sort of the first 50, and now we've got the last 50. And I've never really looked at these in sort of major detail. You know, I've made top 10 lists before, and we've even done a top 25 once in a while, but it's been a long time that I've sort of just looked at the overall list of vehicles. And there's some quite interesting quirks to it, especially as I was going through and sort of editing the labels and the footage and putting everything in where it needs to be. The Elegy is in 50th place. The Elegy RH8, the classic, it's still in the top 10 for the sports class as well. The Elegy always used to be the number one sports car. It was absolutely dominant for so long until they just demolished the class with the Pariah, and then since then, you know, they've just kind of been putting supercar level of lap time cars in the sports class. But the Elegy, the old guard, the classic number one sports car, it's not number one in sports anymore, but it still manages to make it into the top 10 of a 80 strong sports class, and it's in the top 50 overall. And it was just quite nice to see that the Elegy still manages to make it into the top 50. And also, it's close to it is the original number one quickest car in the game, the Entity XF. It's obviously only 31st place for the Supers class and 47th place overall. That was always the interesting thing back in the day, that the Entity was never too far away from the Elegy. The number one supercar was actually not that much quicker than the number one sports car, just because they both have so much traction, and that's where they get their pace from. But those two are still managing to hold their own, those two classics from 2013 in the top 50. And I think that's as far as some original 2013 cars get. You know, we are going to see some cars from 2014 and, you know, some old cars, but when it comes to original 2013 cars from when the game was first released, the Elegy and the Entity were the quickest. We had things like the Turismo R, for example, and other old vehicles, but they're all DLC vehicles. They weren't added when the game was released. The Entity and the Elegy are the fastest of 2013 original release vehicles. So now we're all into only DLC vehicles from this point on. And yeah, some interesting ones to sort of talk about. Obviously things like the Cyclone, which a lot of people seem to think is one of the quicker vehicles. It still does very well to be in, you know, close to the top 40, but a lot of the time, and this is why I've continued to do this testing over the years and why I started doing it in the first place, as I talked about in the original video, you get tests that people do that aren't very good from a performance and scientific testing perspective. You'll get, YouTubers doing drag races at the airport and things like that, and electric vehicles like the Cyclone, like the Neon, like the Tesseract, they might do well in those kind of situations because they're all about acceleration. But as soon as you take them onto a regular racing circuit and try to race them properly, they're gonna not do so well because they've not got great traction, they don't have very good top speed, and it's all of these aspects that go into lap time performance rather than just your acceleration. So that's why I've continued to do these tests and why I will continue to do these tests. Just obviously the form that they take might be slightly different. We've got one of our second highest profile tie and one of the newest ties in lap time with the Xeno and the Tyrus, both with a 1 minute 1.428. The Xeno gets the position because it has a higher top speed, but I think that's the only supercar tie for lap time as well. And it might actually, I'm not entirely sure about this because I haven't checked it, but it might be the only tie for lap time where two cars get exactly the same lap time within the same class. I don't know that for certain because there's been 19 instances of it, like I said, but I think from what I can remember, all of the other instances where two cars from different classes got exactly the same lap time, the Xeno and the Tyrus might be the first one and the only one where they're from exactly the same class. They're both in supers. We're coming on to the top 5 in the sports class at this point, so 5th place with the Amorgon is good enough for 34th place overall. And obviously this is where we're starting to see the mix of sports and supercars. We've seen that a lot in this top 50, where it's just, in fact in the top 100 overall, as I said earlier, we've got over 40 sports cars and over 40 supercars, and until we get to sort of the top 20 or so, the sports and supercars are just mixing in with each other because there's, as we've gone on through the years, Rockstar have added quicker and quicker sports cars. They've added quicker and quicker supercars as well, but not as many as supercars that are on the same pace as, for example, the older T20. Most supercars have kind of taken on that level of performance with the 1 minute 1, 1 minute 2 range of lap time, and sports cars have gotten quicker from the Elegy days to match that 1 minute 1 level of lap time. So we've just got a mix of sports cars and supercars. But obviously as we come to the end of the sports cars list, we're up to 30th place overall. We're 18th place for supercars. We are starting to see the supercars be more prevalent. The X80 here in 29th place, but there's only going to be another 12 vehicles that aren't supercars from this point on, for example. So we're starting to get up there. The 1 minute 1 level of lap time it's really strong. These are some really, really strong lap times. Don't be fooled by the fact that we're only up to 30th place. These are all very, very quick cars. There's not many cars that go quicker than this, considering there's 522 that have been tested and we're coming up to the top 25. But even so, the 1 minute 1 level of lap time is really, really quick, and it used to be sort of the gold standard when we're talking about the Nero Custom. Used to be the quickest supercar for a while, and well, one of the best to use in a racing situation, at least because it has a good top speed. But these are all vehicles that will be, or used to be, close to the top of their classes. And in the case of the sports class at this point, they are at the top of their classes in a way. The sports class is sort of like the supers class of old, where 1 minute levels of lap time will get you to the top. The Zentorno here in 24th place, 13th best supercar, still managing to be up there where it has no right to be, with such an old vehicle being so high up in the list and so cheap as well in comparison to all of these other vehicles around it, just behind the Italia RSX, which is in 3rd place for sports cars. And that perfectly encapsulates what I'm talking about, that the 2nd and 3rd best sports cars of the Pariah and the Italia RSX are on the pace of what used to be the quickest supercar of the Zentorno, and in fact they're a little bit quicker. So it's just, the game has moved on from back in the 2014, 2015, 2016 days, and it's kind of crazy, sort of the power creep that's gone on. Now, we're coming into the top 20. Obviously, we've seen the Tempesta there, just misses out on that top 20. But out of this top 20, which starts with the Devestate in 11th place for the Supercars class, only 18 cars break the 1 minute barrier. Out of 522 vehicles, only the top 18 break 1 minute, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. And ironically, we actually start to see bigger gaps in lap time from this point on. It's kind of everything closes in towards that 1 minute barrier. And then as soon as we break it with the Autark in 18th place overall, is the first one to do that. As soon as we break that 1 minute barrier, it just goes crazy and cars get quicker and quicker again. So it's I find it really interesting seeing how it all breaks down like this. We're actually really still really close. You know, the XA21 here in 17th place, a 59.9. The Autark was also a 59.9. These vehicles around the 1 minute barrier range, RE7B for example in 16th with a 59.7. And by the way, this is our highest profile tie for lap time, because the RE7B gets exactly the same lap time with a 59.727 as the Italy GTO, which is the number one sports car. And again, these top sports cars should be in supercars really, but this is further proof of that. A 59.727 for both the Italy GTO and the RE7B. But now we've seen all the sports cars, we're now exclusively into the supercars. We've got 14 cars to go overall. 6 of them are going to be supercars, but we've got other stuff as well. That's not true. There's going to be other supercars as well, but non-raceable supercars. And that is obviously evidenced by the Rocket Voltic being our slowest of the non-raceable supercars and not as quick as the top 5 regular raceable supercars as well, with a 59.5 second lap time. It's not actually that quick these days in comparison. It used to be, but there's been regular cars like the Thrax, for example, that are quicker than it. You don't need a rocket on the back, obviously, to get a quick lap time. And we're into the top 5 for the supercars list at this point as well. It's just amazing that sort of the way that the gaps have gone. You know, we've got still quite a few vehicles in that 59 second range, but as we even get closer into 58 seconds, 57 seconds, we're getting less and less vehicles, just as the natural tendency of there being less really high performance vehicles. But those really high performance vehicles do set themselves apart from everything else. So obviously the top 10 with the Wagner first of all, still rocking in 3rd place for the supercars list, very good for the Wagner. And then we've got the other top 2 supercars of the Krieger, which is 9th place overall, and then we'll have the Emirates, which is Krieger in 9th place overall, Emirates in 8th place, Krieger second best supercar, Emirates the number 1 supercar, at least in terms of regular normal raceable supercars. And now we've got other stuff. We've got the non-raceable crazy rocket boosty vehicles. First up with the Scramjet in 7th place overall for the fastest cars across the entire game, only 2nd for non-raceable supercars. And then one of the big surprises is how far a sports classic car can get in this list with the Toreador. With a 57.6 second lap time, it's just fractionally quicker than what we saw from the Scramjet. It is the quickest sports classic class car, but obviously not raceable in regular sports classic races. And then we've got the top 5. These are the top 5 quickest cars in the entire game out of 522, and 4 of them are open wheelers. And I guess that makes sense. You know, these new breed of open wheel cars, they had their own class created for them. If they weren't going to be the quickest cars in the game, what was the point in adding them? But interestingly, 2 of them aren't quicker than the ultimate quickest supercar, which has a massive rocket on the back, and that's the only reason it gets the lap time that it does. The Vigilante is 3rd place overall. It's the quickest supercar. It's obviously in the non-raceable subclass. And without that rocket, it would be getting a lap time closer to the Bullet, sort of around the 1 minute 6 range. So it shows how important that rocket it is, but it is a bloody powerful rocket on the back of the Vigilante, and that's what gives it that kind of lap time and gets it into 3rd place overall. 2nd place overall for the PR4 with a 56.4. The 2nd quickest open wheel car is the 2nd quickest car overall in the game. And I guess at this point there's no surprises what the number one vehicle is going to be, because it is the quickest open wheel car in the game. But I think what's more impressive is the level of its dominance. The BR8 obviously is the quickest car in the entire game with a 54-second lap time. Only one car breaks the 56-second barrier, and indeed only one car breaks the 55-second barrier. All those other cars, all those tiny differences in performance across 522 vehicles, and the last one is more than a second and a half quicker than the next best. In the last video we had 100 cars separated by 4 seconds. There's 28 cars all within 1 second of each other in the 1:04 range, and here we have the BR8 casually being 1.5 seconds quicker than anything else all on its own. And that is just remarkable performance, to be honest, considering all the vehicles that we've seen. The BR8 really is something else. Obviously all in terms of traction, its top speed isn't great, I always have to mention that, but yeah, it's remarkable how quick this car is in comparison to everything else that we've seen. Now, I always do a comparison at the end of these videos usually, and it's always sort of either first place versus second place, or the new best versus the old best, for example, when it's an update video. But I thought I'd do one with a difference this time. To mark the end of this special countdown, we're going to see how many cars we can get through before the dozer manages to complete a lap. So the slowest vehicle in the game on the right, with the fastest vehicle in the game on the left, and as we saw, as soon as the BR8 has completed its lap, we move straight over to the PR4, and so on, all the way down the order. Will we manage to make it through the entire top 10? Probably not, but let's see how far we can get. And I thought I would do this for a little bit of a difference, just to put it into perspective how slow the dozer is and how quick the top cars are. It's interesting to see how many cars we can get through. So yeah, that is it. 522 cars for these 5 videos. They've been an absolute mammoth undertaking, honestly. They've taken a lot more time than I was hoping that they would, with all the footage changes and just, you know, putting all the text in and the lap times and all the positions in classes for 522 vehicles. It takes a lot of time, and then the videos themselves have been long, you know, half an hour each to sit down and record. But it's been really nice to do, and I wanted to put that extra effort in for, you know, what is a unique period in my car testing. You know, there's probably never going to be a situation where I will have tested every single vehicle like this again. It's just not feasible, as I talked about in the third video. Yes, maybe testing the raceable vehicles or limiting it in some way, but you know, testing all these non-raceable stuff and stuff that's not as relevant, and testing 522 cars, let alone all the boats, planes, helicopters as well that I've also tested, and the bikes. Just, it's a unique place to be in, and before the next gen versions of the game come along and maybe change up the performance entirely with 60 FPS and all that kind of stuff, I wanted to put in this extra effort to get these videos out, just to have one big list in the same way that we did at the very start, for all the vehicles in the game, all the cars in the game at least, and all of them are tested and all of them are here in one big list. It's probably never going to happen again, so thank you guys so much for all of the support over the years. It's been absolutely incredible. I have been saying that this is going to be the final video in the series. It is the 301st video of this lap time countdown series, and there might be another one. I've been thinking about it, just because the new version of the game is going to contain how Special works and certain vehicles that are sort of specific to how Special works. And it seems like those vehicles are going to be in their own sort of subclass, which, just like tuners were, for example, you've got tuner vehicles, for example, this Sentinel, the Sultan RS Classic, it's in the sports class, but it's also in the tuners subclass for racers. So I put out a video of the fastest tuners. I might be able to do that same sort of thing for the how Special works vehicles as well. Test them all as I do here around the track again, and put out a video that is just those vehicles, because obviously they're not going to be able to be compared to all of the other vehicles in this list, especially if I end up testing them at 60 FPS, and we don't know what other performance changes will have happened to all of these vehicles that we're seeing here for the next gen versions of the game. But those vehicles can they can exist in a vacuum just for themselves, and especially if they've got their own specific race class that I can say these are the quickest vehicles to use for the how Special Works races themselves. I can maybe do one last video of this series just for those. Again, they're not going to be exactly comparable to these vehicles, and if there's a vehicle that's half a second off the top pace, for example, we can't necessarily say that it's half a second off for real, because the pace of that whatever class we're talking about might have changed as well. But yeah, there might be one extra video in this series concerning the new vehicles from the new gen versions of the game. It would be nice to do that, I think, also just because this series started on old gen, on the Xbox 360 is where I did all my testing for the first part of this series. Then for a long time, obviously, I've been doing all the testing on PS4. It would be nice to at least bookend it with one video with testing on PS5 as well for the new gen versions of the game. Like I've talked about in the third video of this little mini series, that's not going to be something I can do continually. I'll have to change things up a little bit, retest vehicles, things like that, and that really warrants its own new series. But it would be nice to at least have one video of testing on the new gen versions of the game, even if they're not going to be perfectly comparable to all of these lap times. I think it would be nice to do that. So yes, this is really the final video of this kind of testing, but there might be one extra bonus video in there as well. Just thank you guys. Thank you guys for all the amazing support over the years. Like I said, check out the t-shirt design at bruffy.com/merch. Hopefully you'll enjoy that. And yeah, stick around for the next generation of GTA Online, and indeed the next generation of car performance info videos. As I talked about in that third video, I'm not exactly sure what format that's going to take. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to be doing it going forward, but I am sure that there will be something to keep giving you the best info that I can on car performance in this game. That aspect isn't going away. It's more just about how I end up doing it. And yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for the continued support on every video that I do, but this testing series especially. It's amazing what me deciding to take some cars around a track has turned into, and I'm really looking forward to what it can lead to in the future as well. So for the last time, for a big testing video like this, at least in this series, I'll leave you to watch the final corner for the dozer and the final few bits of the lap for the quickest cars. Thank you guys so much for all your support, and as always, I'll see you next time.